Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I am Liz Dobbins-Smith, the Managing Director for NCEDA, and we're excited to have you with us for today's webinar. I'm going to review a few logistics before we get started. First of all, for the best viewing option, be sure to select the speaker view at the bottom of your screen. And then we are certainly welcome questions from the audience. We will have some time at the end dedicated for that. But if you have any questions throughout the webinar or at the end, please enter those in the Q&A box, not the chat box. That is what the moderator will be checking. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ryan Nance. He is an NCEDA board member and chair of our Professional Development Committee and is going to be today's webinar MC. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Liz. And good morning, everybody. Welcome to NCEDA's Product Development Series, which kicked off as a panel discussion at our annual conference back in June in Wilmington. This webinar is the second part of a multi-part series. Today's session is going to focus on how we build community support for product development. I'm Ryan Nance, Director of Economic Development at North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives, also chair of the Professional Development Committee for NCEDA. You guys know one of the many challenges facing economic development community in North Carolina is available product inventory. The issue is multifaceted with many challenges to consider as communities navigate site readiness. Today, our webinar will delve into how to build community support. And like many issues we face, successful community building requires collaboration, buy-in, and investment. We're joined today by 4 experts. We got the all-star panel today who will share their insights and experience for building community support and going after these opportunities. So learning best practices from these experts, as well as how to demonstrate ROI to local leaders and foster community buy-in on building and site inventory. So first, I'll introduce our moderator here, and that's just in a moment. We need to go over certainly our annual sponsors, the NCEDA. You guys know these companies and organizations support every component of NCEDA's expansion mission and growing body of programs. We thank these sponsors for their generous support. The multi-part series that benefits our membership, just like this one, is a direct result of their sponsorship and the volunteers here today. So now I'm pleased to announce where we have a Mr. Todd Tucker, our moderator today. You guys know Todd as he's an NCEDA board member, as well as president of the Surry County Economic Development Partnership. He's a Mount Airy resident, NC State graduate, and holds his CECD designation from IEDC. Many thanks go out to our panelists and our moderator today. We appreciate your participation. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Tucker, who's done a fantastic job, again, in pulling together an all-star panel of panelists. And Todd, you want to grab the mic and take it away, man.
Good morning, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today. Ryan, thank you for that introduction. And you hit it right on the head. We've got an all-star panelist today. I think 4 of best in the business at the local level, at least from my perspective. And so we'll go ahead and kick this off and introduce those. And first, one of our first panelists is Jennifer Lantz. Jennifer is the executive director with the Wilson Economic Development Council. I've been there since 1989, so she's been in business there in Wilson for a long time. She's responsible for the development of over 4,000 plus new industrial jobs, attracted over $3 billion investment, and responsible for new corporate parks and 2 existing industrial parks. She's a University of Richmond graduate. She served on the North Carolina Economic Developer Association board. She served on the Global Transpark Commission board. She has served on the Industrial Asset Management Council board. She's been on a lot of boards. She's also been on the Research Triangle Regional Partnership Board of Directors, currently on that board, and a couple of honors too. You don't work that long in economic development in the community without having some honors. The Rotary Foundation of Rotary International, she's a Paul Harris Fellow. And she's also a Mary Jo Hanover Award winner for the IAMC, Industrial Asset Management Council. And Jennifer has $2. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for being on the panel with us. We also have Kristin Reese, and Kristin's the Executive Director of Cleveland County Economic Development Partnership. She's been there for over 17 years there at the partnership. And during that time, she's collaborated and worked on over 125 successful economic development projects. They've all kind of spanned all different types of industries. And she's combined on a total of 6,500 new jobs and $6.4 billion in new capital investment. Kristin also is proud of some of her marketing efforts, the disruptive approach that she takes, and some of the things she's done. One example of that work is Charlotte's Backyard, which is an award-winning multimedia talent attraction campaign. She's launched that about 5 years ago, and that continues to be lauded by IEDC and other industry professionals as one of the next best practices in economic development. And I've stopped counting the number of projects I've lost to Kristin a couple of years ago, so I stopped doing that. Kristin, thanks for being on the panel with us. Also next is Chuck Heustess. Chuck is the Executive Director of Bladen County Economic Development. Under his leadership, the county is one of North Carolina's most sparsely populated counties, but has successfully navigated the rapids and economic development landscape marked by daunting challenges and exciting job creation opportunities. Chuck has supported the success of companies ranging from DuPont to Birdsong Peanuts, Carolina Cold Storage, and has created Bladen County's innovative network of business incubator buildings that serves as a product development model that other rural counties have replicated. And I'm sure Chuck will talk some more about that today. Chuck holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from some college in Chapel Hill, and is an avid supporter of those people that play some sports over in Chapel Hill. Next and not last by all means is the Godfather of economic development in North Carolina, Donny Hicks, the Executive Director of Gaston County Economic Development Commission. Donny's been the director there for over 35 years. The EDC, the Gaston County Department, is charged with recruiting new business and retaining existing companies, marketing and development of public-private business parks. During this time, he's participated in the development of more than 3,000 acres of industrial land, on which 12 million square feet have been constructed. So he's obviously going to be part of this panel for that. He's a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and a Master's of Public Administration degree from that school in Chapel Hill. In 2001, in 2009, he was chosen by the North Carolina Economic Developers Association as the Economic Developer of the Year. He's a past president of NCEDA, and in 2005, he was selected by the Gaston Gazette as Person of the Year. Mr. Hicks serves on the Executive Committee, Board of Directors of the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, and he currently serves as Vice Chairman of the North Carolina Community College Foundation Board. So Donny is very involved, and we appreciate all of our panelists and their time today. So guys, welcome. Thank you for being a part of this. And what I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start with some questions. And Chuck, let's go ahead and start with you on this first question. So in your community, Chuck, who are your main stakeholders that you ask for local support? When you're going to start a shell building or park or something, who do you go for to kind of develop that support to do that work?
Good point made at the beginning of this was that it's about collaboration and putting together a lot of partners. So locally, the lead is our nonprofit real estate corporation, which is Bladen's Bloomin' Agri-Industrial. Short, a lot of people know it as Bladen's Bloomin', but it's a private board that heads up product development in the county. And then, of course, the county is a partner. I'm the Executive Director of Economic Development and the nonprofit real estate corporation. Of course, the towns that have the industrial park and provide the utilities. And then local partners that help provide funding, such as Committee of 100. In Bladenboro, North Carolina, the landowner is a nonprofit corporation, Bladen Developments. They also help us raise money in that community. And then a really big partner in our success has been 4 County EMC and NCEMC. both of our industrial parks are served by the cooperatives, and they do a lot to help us with site development, master planning, but certainly financing product development.
Chuck, sounds like you got a wide range of different players that you go to start that support mechanism to start growing for that. Kristin or Jennifer or Donny, any of you want to add to who else you may bring to the table for that support to start it? All right, well, we will move on and we'll talk and see. Let's go, Kristin, let's go to you. You know, in your community, is there a tried and true formula that you use to gain support for that? Is there something, kind of a formula you work out, say, hey, I know if we do it this way, we can get everybody on board and make it happen?
Let me try that again. I unmuted myself and now you can probably hear me. So my answer to that question would be yes, but I'd like to insert a caveat, meaning that we are constantly evaluating and tweaking certain aspects of our formula. And in my experience, there have certainly been some basic foundational aspects related to our strategies for generating support for product development in our community over the years that have really not changed much. However, as a result of being successful over the years, implementing these programs, having success, we've certainly been able to scale back some of the time that we have to spend in terms of instilling confidence in the elected leaders that their investments are worthwhile, because they've actually been able to see the fruits of our labor in terms of product development strategies, being able to essentially impact economic development and increase the chances of companies relocating to our community. And so I want to mention also, like, for the sake of today's discussions, even though I know we're engaged in our community is engaged in the acquisition of land development that represents a variety of different size tracts in terms of acreage for industrial purposes. Really today, I want to primarily hone in on our industrial shell building program that we initiated roughly 15 years ago. I think Liz may have a slide that she can queue up. But to date, the reason why I want to focus on this particular aspect of our partnership in terms of product development, because this particular partnership between two local government entities, City of Shelby and Cleveland County local government, has been truly one of the most collaboratively successful yet most capital intensive product development programs that we have ever engaged in or deployed within our community. And that program has resulted in the successful construction of 3 shell buildings, which you can see up on that slide, which has allowed us to recruit 3 fantastic companies who have created hundreds of new jobs and made substantial amounts of capital investment with those projects moving to our community. And we're fortunate that we have Shell 4 underway. We're completing site prep on that and hope to have that building completed by January 2023. But in terms of our formula for successful product development, I love to call it a recipe for success, because it does kind of remind me of a baker trying to create the recipe, like for the perfect chocolate chip cookie, which I just happen to have right here next to me. I love chocolate chip cookies. I'm a terrible baker, so I'm not sure what that means, but just like a baker, our community has really maintained some key, very precise, measured ingredients that we have infused into our recipe over the years and that we've maintained. But, you know, about that recipe, we certainly understand that if those key components, those key ingredients in the recipes are missing, then that chocolate chip cookie is going to be pretty crappy. So we want to make sure that those ingredients are continuously infused throughout our process moving forward. And that one of the main ingredients, I'm going to just touch on 3 because I want other folks to be able to chime in. And I know I'm talking really, really fast, but I want to be able to cram a lot into this. But the first key ingredient that I like to say, do not pass go, do not do anything until you include this key ingredient, which is data. And it's an economic developer's responsibility in their respective communities to track and evaluate the parameters of every single project that comes across their desks, such as square footage, they're tracking ceiling height, acreage, floor thickness. That way, that data that you're collecting can essentially end up reflecting what that void in your market is. You do not want to try to guess at what you feel would be the best fit for your community. You need to let the data drive the development. And that's going to also help you in terms of honing in on your targeted industry sectors. And our team has historically requested, evaluated not only the projects that come across our desk, but we are reaching out to our partners at the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, EDPNC, our brokers that we know and have relationships with, developers that we have relationships with that we know are really engaged in the market across the Southeast, so they can share that data with us and in terms of what they're seeing and what companies are looking for in terms of relocating their operations and the structural components of those buildings. So ideally, after at least a year's worth of tracking data and understanding what your missed opportunities are and where your missed opportunities lie as a result of extrapolating that data, you can really hone in on the size and the specifications of the building that you need to construct. So once you have that, then I feel like you are well prepared to move forward in terms of your recipe and add the next key ingredient, which is education. Then you can really tackle the process of educating your elected leaders and other partners and stakeholders, and that evaluation, presentation, education in terms of the data that you have accumulated is really going to serve as a risk mitigation strategy. It's going to make everyone that is vested in that project feel more sure that there's actually going to be a return on investment. In our situation, these are public dollars. There's no private investment into these spec buildings that have been constructed. They want our community, our taxpayers to feel at ease when they approve the financing for those projects. And we feel like if stakeholders do not understand the process, if our elected leaders do not understand the process, then it's our fault. We have not educated them properly, and therefore our chances of getting financing for that project is going to be far less than had we really taken the time to educate them. So educating them on the data, educating them on the long-term value that these buildings could potentially have for our community in terms of making an economic impact, and then really explaining the value that it holds for the company in terms of the time value, being able to shave off a significant portion of construction time for these companies is such a marketing tool, and it is certainly paid off for us in terms of being able to attract companies to these buildings. And so the third ingredient that I'll mention, and I'm only going to briefly touch on this and then save the majority of my comments about this ingredient until later on in the session. But number 3 would be marketing. That is one of the most important ingredients. And again, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let others chime in if they have any further comment, and I'll expand on that in a little bit.
Well, that was a great answer, Kristin. You went through a lot of different levels there, with especially pertaining to shell or spec building. Do any of our other panelists have anything they want to add? It doesn't necessarily need to be shell or spec building related. It could be site development or park related. Does anybody else they want to add their recipe to that?
Todd, not a recipe, but just tips that have worked really good for me. Tours of past success stories. Like when we have a business move in, I carry a lot of elected officials, board members, investors, For example, 4-county EMC once every few years will bring a bus and bring their board of directors down to see what their investments have created. And this one sounds a little bit crazy, but man, it's worked. We all have these naysayers online that you don't do anything. What have you done? Well, somebody will send me, hey, this person's saying that there's nothing being done. They need to see it. I'll actually call them, offer them a tour. Most of them have taken me up on it. The thing is, most of these people see the buildings from the outside. When they go on a tour, they see the people working, they see the equipment. That has bought me more support for our program than anything else I can think of. And then right along that same line, 1 year after the company moves in, we have a 1-year anniversary event where we invite investors and board members and serve Melvin's hamburgers, and you have the employees there, you have the elected officials there, the investors there, and everybody gets to see firsthand the impact. So I think that's been one of our secret weapons, building support.
That's a great idea, Chuck. And anytime you can get a Melvin's hamburger hot, that's a plus for me. Anybody else got anything they want to add to that? All right, if not, Jennifer, let's go to you. How do you address concerns when people say, how are we going to pay for it? It's going to be too expensive. It's going to cost too much. As Kristin alluded to, it's very capital intensive to do product development, whether it's a shell building, spec building, industrial park, mega site, whatever you want to do. How do you address some of those concerns or when those people say that? Jennifer, what's your kind of process on that?
So we start every development, be it a building or property, by developing benchmarks. So we know what a product should deliver in terms of tax dollars and jobs, square footage, all those sorts of things. And we also look at opportunity cost, by not having the product, what are we losing? And because we do that at the start of every project, when people start vocalizing concerns about paying for it, or the cost and could it be too high, we just address those questions with facts.
Facts are always helpful, that's for sure. At least most of the time, they're helpful. How, kind of another question to that, what's been your experience in gaining control of land, either through options or just outright purchase? I mean, how have you gone about, like if you're going to do a new industrial park, do you option the land? Do you just try to outright purchase it? What do you guys typically do in Wilson?
I've used kind of everything. I've used options. I've used right of first refusals. If somebody's really not ready to sell their land in that moment, but know down the road that they, want to know where it's going. We've just done sale and purchase contracts. We've really used all three. It somewhat depends on how quickly we're going to need the land, how quickly we want to put in infrastructure, and whether or not we're ready to do the due diligence. So, based on that, we make our decision.
Okay, great. Does anybody else got anything to add on that part? Cost is always, it's one of the first things that always comes up, at least in my experience, when you're talking with your stakeholders of how we're going to pay for it. Donny, you and Chuck, Kristin, anybody got any thoughts on, what do you guys do when they start talking about cost?
So we have paid most of ours with general fund money. We don't have a countywide water and sewer system, so most everything we've done has been through tax dollars. And we've done a lot of work on showing how we've helped rebuild the county's economy and the money that's been generated from it. I remember the first project we did, we put $330,000 in water and sewer to the small business park. This was pre-incentivized days. And I went back and looked at it the other day. And I think out of that original $330,000 investment, we've collected almost $10 million in taxes. So crack dealers call me and ask, how do you get that kind of return? So I think you can't go through something and spend 2 days talking about that. I think you need to be able to pull out some quick reference to say, this is what it means to us. We've improved our bond ratings. We've stabilized the economy. We've done this with our general fund revenues. But you have to have something, I think, that you can quickly tell people what you're going to, how it's benefited the community, and not drag it on for a 50-page analysis.
And Donnie's right. The other thing is you can look at the appraised value of property in your community, because typically when you do one of these developments and you pull in new investment, appraisal values across the area where the new investment is rise, not just for industrial, but also for commercial and residential. So he's exactly right. It's not a paragraph, it's a couple of sentences, you can say.
Great add in there. I think some of the things I know I probably forget is to look at what's the impact around the area that you're actually doing the development. I think that's a good thing to add on to that. Return on investment is always important, that's for sure. Donnie, let's stick with you. You kind of jumped in on the end of that, but another question for you. Do you use any partners to help you with winning local support? You know, when you go to, since you're using general fund money and you go to your elected officials, do you have a team? Do you have any local partners that you team with that say, hey, yeah, we really got to do this? What does that look like in Gaston County?
Sure. I think when I look back over my experience of doing this, I will try to generalize my comments to make them useful for the whole group, and not how I spent my summer vacation. So when I started, we had 12 municipalities that had been built around the textile industry, and that had largely diminished by the middle part of the 90s. So we were left with all these water and sewer systems. So we did a lot of work to try to interconnect systems and take advantage of the capacity that existed for economic development use. We set up a capital improvements program. And in that phase of product development, which we had dirt at that time, but we just needed utilities, that's largely a technical process. So the people that you need to help you do that are typically the public works people within the municipalities, the counties. Again, we don't have a countywide water and sewer system, so we're dependent on all the municipalities to do this work. In that phase, if that's where you're at, that's largely a technical process, and sometimes a very difficult one to get people to either give up their water and sewer plants or to consider expanding it. So that's a tough process. We eventually moved to trying to develop parks with other people. That, again, was largely water and sewer pieces where you're trying to work with municipalities to do it. But in the last couple decades, we've worked on owning the property ourselves. And so the people that you need, I think, to help you are people that may not show up to a county commissioners meeting, but people that would help you with being an influencer to help the commissioners make a decision, to influence other people in the community to convince them that's a good idea. One of the things you may have to start with is actually getting people to understand that it is the legitimate role of government to take care of itself and have a healthy economy. And to do that, one of the steps you may need to do is develop your own property. There's always this notion that somebody's going to ride on a big white horse and discover you and say, this is the greatest place in the world. I'm going to go spend a couple $1 million here to build a business park. Maybe that happens, but most likely it doesn't. And I think it's a responsibility of the government to ensure that you have land available and that you have the ability to compete. So I would typically find someone that has influence to try to encourage people to understand why we need to do it. We would work with some people that would come and speak at a county commissioners meeting to do it. That's often harder than you think. People will support it, but they may not show up to support it. And then I think you often have times, we have 12 municipalities, so everybody's not going to be direct beneficiary of this project. We try to talk to them about some ancillary benefits that may accrue to them. But I think you have to have a core group of people that will help you generate the support for it. There'll also be people that support it that don't go to the commissioners meetings. And ultimately, you have to have the elected officials be comfortable making that decision. And that can be a long process of both emotional discussions about why you would do this and the benefits to it. And then lastly, I think you also have to realize that you're inducing risk to the decision maker. You're inducing financial risk to them. You're introducing political risk if it doesn't work or people think it's a bad idea. And you have to, in my mind, at the end of the day, if you can cover the political risk of someone using it in a campaign, or you can cover the financial risk, then that to me, those are two of the biggest issues that you have to deal with.
Yeah, great. That was a great answer, Donnie. You covered a lot of things there, and especially liked how you talked about the government's responsibility to maintain itself and working that into, hey, we've got to do this, make sure our economy runs well so we can have what we need to have. I think that's a great point. Chuck, you or Kristin or anybody else have anything to add to any of Donnie's points on that? I thought that was pretty well done.
I really like our model of private development because my board there is 13 of the most respected, influential private business leaders in the community. So when they can go and say, look, you make this public investment or this public-private investment, and we're all going to benefit on the private side, it just carries a lot of weight with my elected officials.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, like a lot of these things, it's different to where, you know, where you are and what works for you and what works better at your end may not work better at somebody else's end. But that's why we've got such a great panelist here today, because we've got a lot of varied how it works. And that's great. Jennifer, you or Kristin want to add anything to that, or we can move on? All right, well, Jennifer, I'm going to go back to you then on this next question. Is there, and I think Kristin alluded to some of this in one of her answers, is there a process you use to determine what size of building or how many acres for a site or industrial park before you ask that support? Do you go, hey, we need to build 115,000 square foot building, 32-foot clear ceilings, or we need exactly 250 acres, or do you use anything to make those determinations?
Yes, and I use two different processes. So building is one thing, land is another. And Kristin's exactly right. You have to do, in my mind, you have to do a lot of research. So there is so much available information between industrial brokers, EDPNC, consultants, and companies about what companies are looking for. So we look at buildings across the Southeast every time we build a shell. And what we're looking for is the sweet spot of where are the least number of buildings and the most requests. And it typically falls somewhere between 50,000 and 150,000 square feet in size. And that's what we build. And ceiling heights can vary. So we put together a questionnaire. We send it out to corporate real estate executives, consultants, and industrial brokers, and just typically tell them what building we built last, what we're thinking about building this time, and just get their comments back. Sometimes that'll change a ceiling height, or it might change the skin of the building, depending on what they're telling us. And then once we have all that information, we go to our city council and county commissioners. And over the years, we've developed a shell building fund, and we simply request the money from the fund and go build the building. On land, we use different criteria. Land, it's more for us, more about where does it make the most sense in terms of what's on the ground. Infrastructure that Donny talked about in terms of water and sewer lines, because, you know, if you're 4 miles from utility lines, you've just made your park that much harder to do. Infrastructure in terms of transportation. Do you want it to be a park with rail? Do you have an interstate? Do you want to be close to the interstate, or is there a 4-lane highway? So we look at all those kinds of things to determine where to put a park before we begin to ask for local support.
Yeah, great. I think all that rings true. As you said, there's a lot of places to get a lot of that information, bounce that stuff off of experts in that field that do that. One follow-up for you, Jennifer, you have a lot of pharma, biotech related stuff in your area. Does that change how you look at your shell buildings too? Do you try to make it more specific? I know shell and spec kind of mean a general, general open space, just a general building. But for you guys, does that mean anything different if you're trying to go specifically for one of those targeted industries?
I tend to build nice looking for the biopharma industry. But I build cold, dark shells. You know, it's essentially 4 walls and a roof, a little bit of electric to run some fans and ventilation louvers, and a light about every other bay. If I'm going to put anything else to the building, I'm going to paint the inside of it white. So you can see it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in December and get the feeling for the space. I don't put in floors, stone. I don't put in vapor barriers. All of those things can change, particularly with the life science industry in terms of drains and underground plumbing that you can't anticipate. So mine's pretty basic.
Kristin, you started this a little bit with talking about the, the data and stuff on the buildings. You got anything you want to add to this question about, determine how you guys build? You built 3, you're building another one. How'd you come up with that?
Kristin, you're muted.
Sorry, Todd, you went in and out a little bit in terms of your question. Were you addressing me?
I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay.
I just want to see if you wanted to add anything to what Jennifer said, because you kind of started that conversation about, hey, we use this type of data for determining the buildings, and you've built 3, and you're building a new one.
Yep.
How did you come to that determination?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jennifer, we really piggybacked on a lot of the processes that she implemented. And again, just going back to my original comments about carefully tracking that data and leveraging that to, guide the building specifications in terms of what we constructed. And we have historically seen the sweet spot come in right around 100, between 100,000 square feet expandable to 250. And that's what we have consistently built in terms of that product. I was smiling when Jennifer mentioned not pouring the floors, though. We have always, struggled with that. I know developers, we had discussions about that in the past in terms of determining what the best route is. And for us personally, it has been to pour the floor. And so the first shell we constructed, we poured the floor. The company that ended up purchasing that building originally tore the floor to pieces. And so we thought, the second one that we construct, we're not going to pour the floor. And, why would we, if they're just going to, need to remove it to add, more floor thickness there for their machinery and equipment. Every building that we poured the floor on, we had offers on the building before construction was completed. That second building that we did not pour the floor on, it took us 13 months post-construction to sell the building. And just the only thing we can deduce is that it was the building just did not show as well. We would have companies come in and they just would not stay as long on the property, and just the interest just was not there. The weeds were growing, and I was out there spraying Roundup every time someone came for a visit. So, again, that's always been a subject that we've kind of, wrestled with. But in regards to the targeted sector that Jennifer mentioned in terms of the life sciences and having to do the drains under the floor, I think that makes quite, a lot of sense if you're targeting that specific sector. And we have not had we haven't had much success with that industry sector. So I get it in terms of how you came to that conclusion. So
sure.
Well,
I think that makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
we've done 8 shells, and in the 8 shells, 6 of the people either had to adjust the floor thickness, or they had to put in drains or underground vats or all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So for us, it does make more sense, but it really depends on I think the industry in your county, and that's something you as an economic developer would need to determine in relationship to the types of companies are there. It makes a lot of sense to do it that way.
Yeah, I would agree. You got to look at what's currently there, what you're targeting, what's around it. That'll help guide you in that process. So, Kristin, let's stay with you and kind of jump off of the buildings and sites specifics there for a little bit. Do you use your local board or governance structure to help you lobby for new product development, or you gather a group of people? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but how you're set up with, I guess, a public-private partnership, do they help you lobby for that for your elected officials and your financing?
Yes, the answer is yes. And I want to go back and kind of readdress the topic of marketing, and I'll weave that into how we are able to leverage those folks and from a lobbying perspective. But the marketing, in my personal opinion, and obviously this is a topic that I'm passionate about, because I just think it can completely change the game for communities and for economic developers in terms of the way that they attract business to their community. My organization's board of directors, it's comprised of, Todd mentioned, both public and private investors. So that's inclusive of a multitude of elected leaders and local government officials that represent various locations throughout Cleveland County. We've got educational partners serving on the board, private sector companies like Duke Energy and Atrium Health. So a really good mix of representatives on our board. And so my staff and I continuously strive to utilize those board meetings when we have them in front of us to keep them engaged and abreast of those data analytics that I mentioned earlier, that we're tracking any real estate trends that we're seeing, and more specifically and importantly, the missed opportunities, meaning that we weren't even able to compete for a project because we were lacking an available product that met the specific requirements of that project. So this approach, we really feel like, ensures that the value and the importance of having adequate product always stays top of mind and is a priority for them. If they're approached or questioned by citizens in our community, other elected officials who may be skeptical about making continued investments in product development, then those folks can really help our organization lobby those individuals that they come in contact with by really explaining that valuable role that the product plays in our community. And so naturally, I'm certain you all are really well aware, again, of that role that marketing plays in the overall economic development process. But it certainly helps in terms of advertising a community's available product to companies, the site location consultants, real estate brokers, other partners who really, are our primary lead generators, if you will. But a lot of folks don't realize that we can actually leverage that same real estate marketing to target a much broader, diverse audience, such as local community partners, small businesses, and then those citizens in our community that really may be completely unaware of the economic development process itself, the shell buildings. I don't know about you all, but well, I know where most of Donny's buildings are, but for us, our shell buildings are located in very rural areas of our community that are not on the beaten path of, or where folks would drive by every day and see, where they would have that level of awareness. And a lot of folks are not reading the newspaper anymore either. So they're not staying abreast of the articles that are being published there that are really recognizing and marketing the shell building assets that we have. So really, we try to leverage those marketing collaterals that originally were specifically designed to target industries or to target those companies that we want to recruit, to actually educate and raise awareness everywhere within the community. And that has really resulted in us being able to target those folks and essentially groom them to be ambassadors, if you will, of, I'll call them product development ambassadors. And because once we educate them and really help them understand the value that it brings our community, then they help to share our message and that message that we've crafted, and help share that message to other people that they know, family members, other residents in our community, that this shell building program has really benefited our community. And so I'm going to again use our City of Shelby and Cleveland County shell building program as an example. Liz, you may have that second slide that I sent you that you could queue up. We have developed and deployed some really aggressive pre-construction marketing collaterals, as well as obviously post-construction marketing strategies, but we also continuously stream updates via our social media platforms as the building is being constructed. So engaging in that pre-construction marketing and advertising to start generating excitement, to start educating folks on what we're doing, how we're leveraging the return from our previous shell building constructions to reinvest into future projects. And so I think that's also a very important message that we need to continue putting out. And so we're, again, leveraging social media platforms, we're utilizing Google advertisements, and we're also utilizing targeted industry publications. And so lastly, our lobbying efforts for new product development, I think, have been highly effective, the most effective when we have leveraged the voices of the corporate manufacturing officials who represent the companies that actually relocated to our community. I think Chuck maybe mentioned it, just being able to let them explain how the shell building, when it was available to them for purchase, was one of the primary factors tied to their decision to relocate their operations to Cleveland County. It's so much more meaningful to let them be the voice and to let them share that message versus us trying to share their message. And so, you know, when they are allowing those officials to tour their building after they have retrofitted it, after they've purchased it and retrofitted it to their specifications, being able to allow those folks to tour their building and explain how that building caught their attention because they knew it could shave 10 to 12 months off of their construction timeline and could allow them to focus on speed to market in terms of the product they're going to be manufacturing. That is just such a meaningful message that we could never replicate. And I would say that would be one of the most useful ways that we can leverage their voice to benefit us.
It sounds like you have utilized your groups and your other folks, and along with marketing and grassroots efforts to really do a good job of getting support for that. Let's jump off of that for a little bit. Chuck, I'm gonna go to you real quick. How have you worked with any outside consultants having like a market feasibility study or a shell building study or an impact analysis done on developing shell buildings parts or anything? Have you worked with any groups to come up with any studies like that?
Yeah, Todd, definitely. So this is just going to sound like a list of plugs. So congrats to the people who have helped me. Those that I haven't worked with, I'm not discounting your services. You left out a really important one in legal structure, because lots of times when you're putting together different grant funds and public funds, private funds, it can get complicated on how to legally do it. Ernie Pearson and his group have been a very valuable partner in navigating and structuring those legal structures. When you're going after, for example, EDA and some others, it requires feasibility. Good places to start there are your local COG, or I've used the NC growth folks to do feasibility studies. On economic impact, if it's a very small one project that I'm having to do, our local region, North Carolina Southeast, will do it. If it's a larger project where I need more detailed information, I've used Crystal Morphus, and I've used, again, Ernie Pearson on that. But a lot of what we do, Todd, are build to suits. We've done 24 projects in 21 years. So a lot of ours are doing a build to suit for a small company that's growing, and we use their data. where is your demand? Where are your contracts? And then that's the evidence that I take to my boards to validate building the building for them.
Sounds like you use a lot of good regional and statewide partners to kind of chime in on what needs to be done, how it needs to be done. And you hit on an important thing, which we did not talk about, is legal structure. How some of these things are put together, especially when you have multiple financing partners, multiple grants and things of that nature. Good point there, Chuck. And one thing to kind of finish up, I want to hit one point here. We're coming to the close of this. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But Donny, real quick, how do you navigate kind of the political interests in a county where you have a lot of municipalities? I think Kristin talked about that a little bit, but you know, you've got a couple, 4 or 5 different cities you got in the county. Well, how do you work through that, Donny? What's something you guys do to make that happen?
And so again, we're somewhat unique. We got a dozen cities in the county, and when we went back and talked about the water and sewer work that we did, in a lot of cases, one municipality may provide the water and sewer to a plant that locates in another municipality. So one of the things that we always try to work on is talk about the shared benefits. We oftentimes have to get two cities to work together, either on the development part to get the product developed, or to locate the company once the product is developed. And I think 2 things: trying to maintain relevance to where they're at, trying to figure out what they need, what's important to them at the time, and be relevant to them. And I think also trying to keep them engaged in the process as much as possible and institutionalize that process as much as possible within our system, so that you're not trying to go recreate product development activities each time. And then we're also trying to keep them engaged even when we're not developing product in their community.
Right. Guys, anybody else have anything? I know, Kristin, you got a couple of different towns and municipalities there. How do you work through that?
Well, we have traditionally, City of Shelby has traditionally taken the lead in terms of approaching the county. I guess that original collaboration that was initiated 15 years ago. And so that's been, a program that has kind of continued forward. We have had discussions with other partners representing other municipalities in years past. And those discussions are ongoing. I mean, we certainly are supportive of developments in, across the county if it makes sense. I mean, I think we've covered all the reasons why you should make those investments, and the kind of the evaluation aspects of where you want to put product and geographically speaking, and ensuring that the transportation infrastructure and the utility infrastructure is there. But it can be challenging to navigate. And for us, we have not had any interest from the private side, from private developers in years past, and have had to really just take full control of creating our own destiny, so to speak. The whole "if you build it, they will come" mentality was really what was really our take on the situation, certainly after doing necessary due diligence to ensure that we felt comfortable there would be a return there with the first building. But just recently until just recently have we started being approached by private developers that fortunately are looking at other locations in the community that we have traditionally not had an opportunity to engage in public led development. So I think Donny though covered it well, and it's just part of the process in terms of communication. So
great, Chris, I appreciate that. And I want to go ahead and thank our panelists. We're kind of coming to the end of our time here. We do have a couple of questions. I want to try to get to some of these questions in the chat that we have. We have one question that says, are any of you putting a pause on shell building construction, or do you know of any other local ED directors who have put a pause on doing any product development or shell because of rising costs and any other challenges?
No, I mean, the costs are horrific, but at the end of the day, there are no industrial buildings in America. So until you see wholesale closures of industries, you've got nothing to sell in the building department if you don't have a shell.
Absolutely. I agree with what Jennifer says. I mean, we, for example, our third building that we had already designed and had approved for construction was approved right before COVID. You know, everything broke loose with COVID and the world shut down. And I have to give our officials, our elected leaders, so much credit, and our local government officials, because, you know, they certainly, I mean, this was such a new, you know, kind of uncharted territory for us globally. And, you know, we were seeing, you know, pretty major economic impacts and, you know, supply chain disruptions. You know, you all know what we lived through. And when Donny talks about that emotional the emotional aspect tied to the decision making as it relates to approving and financing those projects, it was a very emotional time where they could have easily said, no, we're not moving forward. And it probably would have been, I probably would have understood, completely understood their decision. And instead, because we had spent so much time educating them over the years, and so many of these elected leaders we had served with for so long, we didn't have to take the time to explain to them that that development was still crucial and still important to our community, and that we needed it. They got it. And so that kind of goes back to that education process, I think, that is so important, that can really pay big dividends when you find yourself in the midst of a, you know, COVID era, or presently when you have building material costs that have just, you know, they're through the roof, and you see the, you know, your shell building cost double or triple, yet they still say, it's okay. We know you need it. We, you know, there's that opportunity cost and, or lost opportunity if we don't move forward. So
I would agree. And I mean, cost is always an issue, but demand can kind of drive some of the, like as you said, drive the answer to that. We have a couple more questions in the question and answer, but we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is, with those questions, what we'll do is we'll send those questions out to our panelists, and then email those back out to you, some of the answers that they have on them. Two pretty decent questions that I think would be a good answer, but to be respectful of everybody's time. Ryan, I want to turn it back over to you and thank our panelists for being here today. But Ryan, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you and let you close us out for today.
Great job, Todd and panelists. And I mean, I don't know what else you could ask for, folks, when you can chime in. Some things you just can't get in a textbook, right? I mean, from, you know, what Chuck was saying and how he handled some of the naysayers on social media. Donny's rehabilitating crack users over in Gaston County somehow with this value proposition. So it's everything in between. Jennifer, Kristin, thank you all for your contributions here today. You guys know by now, building community support can be challenging, and you've heard some of the unique angles given just how different and unique each community is. We're certainly grateful for the deep dive and how these panelists engaged and shared their perspective. Right now, I think Liz is going to share just a quick update. We wanted to help our folks and partners at the NC Railroad. You guys may have seen an email earlier from Joe Stallings this week. They're just announcing a new round of applications for their site ready funding, and you can see some of the details here on that. So just a plug for NC Railroad, and this kind of is a nice segue into another tool that the Professional Development Committee has been working on. So again, trying to put ourselves in y'all's shoes as the local developers and the challenge with constantly new programs coming on, funding changes, at what time of year is a particular application session going to be open. Liz may be able to pull up here. So we've recently been working, thanks to the help of Crystal Morphus and her team at Creative EDC, is trying to put all this together, at least the major product development resources and organizations contributing to this, all in kind of one easy to use matrix, at least a high level of what's available out there, a hyperlink into the detailed either applications or program requirements as a tool and a helpful aid to the local developers out there. I think there's a page 2 as well. This is hot off the press. There's still a little more polish that we've got to put to it. Liz is going to work to get this integrated into NCEDA's website and the resource page. But we wanted to share this in the context that we know there's a lot of stuff going on out there, from federal money to new state money, legislative efforts of NCEDA and advocating for any gaps in product development opportunities out there. So just wanted to share that. We'll talk a little bit more in future webinars. And to that point, you guys will see, so you heard a little bit today from Kristin, Chuck, and others. Legal structure, due diligence. Those are some of the future webinars that are coming up. We'll be able to take a deeper dive into those and really help drive some value for our members here. Last few points, we've got always thank our annual sponsors for supporting NCEDA, and all of you guys for joining us today. Certainly watch your email for upcoming in-person and virtual events, including the luncheon in Charlotte. I believe we're September the 13th, and then fall conference in Asheville, October 3rd and 4th. All these good things coming up. Liz sends these great e-newsletters. I know they're long and chock full of information. Try and find time to read through those. Certainly all the things from professional development, legislative, and other member resources, down to even the personal things about people's families and certainly professional promotions and everything in between. So want to thank everybody today. Todd, fantastic job with your all-star panel. Donny, Chuck, Kristin, and all you folks out there. Jennifer, Lantz bringing it in from Wilson. So thank you guys. We're at 11:03, so appreciate the few extra minutes. We'll see you on the next rodeo.
Thank you, guys. You did a great job.